Coming up, voters across the country are heading to the polls for Election Day. ICT's political correspondent shares the major races and previews the presidential election less than 1 year away. Plus, we're talking Indigenous film and books. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The ICT Newscast is sponsored by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving American Indian nations and people in the recovery and control of their rightful homelands. On the web at iltf.org.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amirawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today in Washington, D.C. The White House Tribal Youth Forum first started in 2014 after the launch of the Generation Indigenous initiative under President Barack Obama. Now the yearly gathering of Indigenous youth is in its 5th year. ICT's Pauly Denetclaw was there and has this report.
Yeah, it's a Pauly Denetclaw Yanishya. I'm here at the White House Tribal Youth Forum, where over 100 youth from all over the nation, as well as international, have come here to Washington, D.C. to engage with federal officials and talk about the issues that are important to them. I talked to a few of them today.
Earlier on the panel, we were talking about climate resiliency, and we met with leaders from the administration, Chairman Mallory and Mr. Zahid, who is the assistant to the president. And that's what I talked about. I'm like, well, you all need to start thinking about what our world would look like if we completely phased out of the fossil fuel industry, but also what our world would look like if we hold those people accountable. And these are huge conversations that are going to be had at COP28 in Dubai and at future COPs.
During the forum, federal officials sat down to talk with the young people about their positions and career journeys. They also shared advice about college and how to choose a career path.
So young people right now are visiting with folks in federal agencies, talking about where they grew up, where they're from, really kind of humanizing the positions that they're in, encouraging young people to apply for public service, and hopefully we'll see more young people here in Washington, D.C.
The Interior Department's Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Brian Newlin, got to see his daughter Meredith participate in the forum. She said it was her second time.
Well, it makes me really proud to see Meredith here at this event because she's so engaged and conscientious. And I think she really represents the potential for young people across Indian country because they're all so brilliant. Meredith is really brilliant. But it just makes me hopeful. It inspires me in the work that I do, knowing how much talent, how much determination is coming up to make the world a better place.
I'm Pauly Denetclaw with ICT News here in Washington, D.C.
In years past, the White House Tribal Nation Summit usually follows the Youth Forum, but details for that event have yet to be announced by the Biden administration. We go now to Oregon, where a new agreement over salmon with tribes has been unveiled. The Biden administration has pledged over $200 million to reintroduce salmon in the Upper Columbia River Basin. The money would come from the Bonneville Power Administration and be paid out over 20 years. The deal includes the inability to sue the government for that 20-year time period. Its signers include the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, and the Spokane Tribe. The construction of the Grand Coulee Dam and the Chief Joseph Dam historically disrupted salmon runs, causing a devastating cultural loss. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation has already come up with $8 million additional dollars for juvenile salmon. Well, a familiar sight across tribal lands has gained a new member. A goat was spotted with a pack of res dogs on the Beaver Lake Cree First Nation. That's according to reporting by the CBC. The photo of Bruce the goat went viral after it was shared on social media. The goat was a pet that belongs to 9-year-old Louise May Lewis. She had wanted a deer for her birthday, but the family got a goat instead. He was spotted with the family's other dogs when the picture was taken. The family explained that he thinks he's a dog himself and is often out with them. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. A new novel from an Ojibwe author is in bookstores. A Song Over Miskwaa Rapids is from Bois Forte citizen Linda LeGarde Grover. ICT's Shirley Sneve has this interview.
It's my fourth fiction book, and they center around a fictional reservation and band in northern Minnesota. It's fictional, but it's very much like the lands that my family's from, Bois Forte and also Grand Portage and Fond du Lac. So it's like that, but it's fiction.
Sure it is. I mean, you must have modeled the characters on some folks, or stories you heard.
David Troyer has a book that I admire. It's a novel called Prudence, and so somebody was asking him too, because it's set in Walker, Minnesota, and so they're saying, what part here is really happened and stuff, and he said, I made it all up.
Birds have a lot of symbolism in all Native cultures, right? And for you guys, Migizi is one of those, but the robin seems to be the messenger in your book. Tell me about the robin.
The robin takes care of stories, of old stories, and so communicates them to to other robins, and that is their kind of their sacred trust here. And so they keep the stories. They care for them, they observe what's going on, and so that adds to the story, and then it passes on to another generation. And so they're kind of they're not as noticeable, I guess, a bird, but they do know the stories. And the female robins, actually, I read quite a bit about older women in this book, and female robins, as it is everywhere in the bird and animal world, are not as colorful and splashy as the males. At the same time, they are the underpinnings of existence here, and just as female humans are.
There's a lot of humor in the book, and the interplay between those who are in this world and those who have passed on, I think, is just a delightful read. I don't want to give too much away, but the way the aunties come together with their lawn chairs, I think, is just charming.
Well, my aunt, and she's in the next world herself now, and has been for quite a while, but she used to talk in that way, and so I enjoyed having those ladies come to the book here, and I remember she used to say that on the fourth day, after someone dies, the spirit arrives in the next destination, but she said, yet at the same time, they are still among us all the time. So it's just it's a leap of faith, and something that I think is a pretty easy leap for Native people in the way that we see the world and have the world shown to us. And so I had her in mind when the ladies made their appearance here in this book. But to me, the story, the land itself is the not just the backdrop, but actually the large entity in the story is the people in northeastern Minnesota living on that land, and great changes taking place in their community. And yet the terrain, though we may change the terrain, and there's something in my newest book about changes to the terrain and human-made inroads on things that you just go, well, is that really a good thing? But at the same time, I I think that the land itself, the terrain around us, I mean, not just the earth, I mean, the water, everything is so much larger and more powerful than we are. And and have as their, what breathes life into them is, is the creator, great spirit. And so we are really kind of frail and futile as we do things. Just the same, this is what we have now. And I think we're fortunate, that we have still have reservation lands. I mean, those of us who are not obliterated, we are thankful for this every day. And at the same time, I think that traditionally we have felt, just as the robin is about the stories, our task has been to appreciate and to care for what we have been given, which is the Mother Earth that we walk upon. And so that's a big part of this story. And in all my books, then what is happening up there? And a treaty happened. People in earlier books, people had to relocate to move there, and then the characters in the books experience the things that all of us have. I mean, the boarding school, the education policies, the termination policies of the 50s through the late 80s, all the programs associated with these things. And then, of course, the larger degree of tribal sovereignty and self-determination, and I want to show that it's not a perfect world, and we are not perfect beings in it either. We still must deal with things in the contemporary world, and it can be a struggle sometimes. How do we maintain what we really have been taught is our duty to continue in a world that changes so much.
The 48th Annual American Indian Film Festival took place in San Francisco, California recently. The 9-day festival featured screenings, awards, panels, and more. ICT's Paris Wise spoke with the executive director and one of the filmmakers.
I am the executive director of the American Indian Film Festival, and we have been around since 1975. We started in Seattle, Washington. The festival was actually started by my father, Michael Smith, who passed in 2018. But, I've been working along with him since I was born. I was born into the film festival, and learned from him, watched, how he, presented the festival to the community. The festival's always been community-based, and he moved the festival from Seattle to San Francisco in 1977, and we've been showcasing programs every year since then, and so we are now on our 48th festival season, so we're really excited.
This year, there are nearly 60 films, shorts, music videos, docs up for awards as well. Can you give us a little overview of some of these projects people will see and some of the creatives behind them?
A bulk of the films that are presented at the public library are all free to the community, and so we welcome everybody to come out. That's a total of 15 programs, free programs, and some programs have up to about 8 films in them. And a lot of the films that are going to be shown throughout are nominated for our awards, which is features, documentaries, music video, animation, and so we have some incredible films this year. Bones of Crows by Marie Clement, Rosie by Gail Marie, and but one of the filmmakers that we have is Jack Kohler and Katie Dorr's film Gift of Fear.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because Jack Kohler is here to join us. Hi, Jack. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Tell us about your film, The Gift of Fear.
Well, Gift of Fear is a narrative feature. It deals with the missing and murdered Indigenous women's issue. And we started doing a documentary, and we realized the only way to reach a mass group of people, especially non-natives, was to make a narrative feature, something that was entertaining, but still got the point across about this issue that a lot of people don't know about. And so it's about a young Native girl, Millie, who's a foster youth, whose mother was a missing and murdered Indigenous woman. And so she's growing up and she's looking for identity, a place to belong. And unfortunately, she's leaning towards the gang life because she wants a family, and her social worker pulls her out of the gang life. But then that's where the conflict comes in, and she gets one of her good friends gets kidnapped and is being forced into the human trafficking area, which is quite often happens with a lot of young Native girls and also foster youth. So we deal with that issue, and then we're trying to represent the MMU, which is the Missing and Murdered Unit, which was created by Deb Haaland, our Secretary of the Interior. And we're trying to put it out there as something that's actually going out and doing something positive about this issue, this crisis that's been going on since Pocahontas. Pocahontas was probably one of the first documented MMIW cases in America. But, that the whole Pocahontas theme has been romanticized and sort of whitewashed. And so we're trying to give another perspective through a narrative film. I've had lots of films in the American Indian Film Festival. In fact, my very first documentary won the Best Documentary Award, which was River of Renewal. And from there, I started creating more and more, and it was a good catalyst, that film. And that was back in 2008. And so, filmmaking is a good outlet, and a good way for Native Americans to tell their story, their history, which oftentimes is not presented properly. And Hollywood hasn't done a very good job in the past of representing Native American history, life, crises. And so I think as Native American filmmakers, that's what we need to do. We need to tell the true story of what happened.
Since you're returning to this festival, what does being a part of it this year mean to you?
Well, we always look forward to the festival every year. And I miss Michael Smith a lot, seeing him at the festival and being there. And it's always good to see all the new talent coming out and representing Native Americans all over the country, and seeing old friends and being with good friends like Mattia.
Mattia, can you tell us more about what will be happening over the course of the 9 days, in addition to the awards and the screenings of these films?
We're going to have an hour-long sit-down with Janice Schminding. She's the actress from Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls, and it will be hosted by local East Bay comedian Jackie Kali'ia'a, who is with Good Medicine Comedy. An ITVS member from San Francisco, Vision Maker Media representative, and also BAVAC representative in San Francisco. And so these three individuals are going to talk about funding opportunities within their collective organizations. And they all have connections, in broadcasting. And so this is a really good opportunity for filmmakers, emerging filmmakers, producers, just to come and listen and learn about the opportunities in television broadcast. We are excited about another project that we're hosting. It is the premiere of Marvel's new series called Echo. And, it's one of Marvel's newest superhero series that follows a heroine named Maya Lopez from the Choctaw Nation. And we finalize our festival with our annual awards show. And we have two comedians hosting the awards ceremony. We are bringing back a Jackie Kali'ia'a, and then also a comedian from Los Angeles. His name is Tyler Clare. If you'd like to check us out, please visit our website at aifisf.com.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Across the country, today is Election Day, and it's the unofficial kickoff for the presidential race in 2024. Pauly Denetclaw is covering politics for ICT. She has developed a new database that is keeping track of the presidential candidates and the issues. Welcome, Pauly.
Thank you so much for having me, Aaliyah.
It's really difficult to compare and contrast the presidential candidates on Native American issues. Tell us first how you went about building a way to track.
So it is very challenging to track how the presidential candidates platform is for Indigenous issues and for tribal nations and tribal leaders, and where they stand when it comes to understanding tribal sovereignty. And so what I did is I went back and I looked at articles, whether they held past positions. For example, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has a history of unrecognizing state tribes. And that's information that I then included in the database, because on Christie's website, there isn't a specific section that talks about tribal nations and tribal governments. And so that is the way that I tried to fill in some of these gaps that we do see when we're talking about presidential candidates and tribal nations.
This weekend, a new presidential poll came out that showed the race is already a toss-up between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. What do you take of those polls, Pauly?
So as we saw in the past elections, is polling can be really helpful, but as we've seen in 2016, it's not always accurate. And it was very surprising that Donald Trump won, according to a lot of polling that was happening. And so it does give a lot of information to presidential candidates and where they stand. But at the end of the day, we won't know until folks go to the polls.
Something really interesting to me when I was actually looking at those polling numbers is that they are very much emphasizing the Black and the Latino vote, but the Native vote seemed to be almost insignificant or not mentioned at all.
It is very interesting to me that a lot of polling doesn't include Native American voters, because the Native vote is extremely powerful, especially if we're talking about states like Alaska, Arizona, New Mexico, South Dakota, Wyoming, and other states. And so I think that it would be it wouldn't paint a full picture if the Native vote was not included, especially in these key states where the Native vote does swing elections. And it is a very powerful voting bloc, especially in Arizona. So Arizona has a huge portion of the Navajo Nation, as well as several other Indigenous nations in the state. And when we're talking about District 2, they have a huge voting bloc in that specific congressional district. And so I think it's really important to include the Native vote when we're talking about polling.
We know that, especially during presidential campaigns, a lot of Indigenous folks who work in politics will lend their time and energy to a particular campaign. Are there any early signs of Native American participation working in campaigns?
There is. So for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign, they have already have a Native American liaison, if you will, as part of their campaign. RFK actually has a very robust platform on his listed on his website when it comes to tribal nations and tribal governments. And so we already do see folks jumping into these campaigns, which I think is really important, because then we do see things like Native, yes. I'll list it on the website.
I want to actually switch gears and talk about today's election. We know that there are voters heading to the polls as we speak. What are you watching and where?
Yeah, so I just want to say that I'm sorry, just looking at my notes here. There were 91 Indigenous candidates from 19 states who ran in 2023. and particularly coming from New Mexico, Arizona, and Washington State. And so today I'm watching New Mexico, Arizona, and Washington. And Alaska also had a ton of Indigenous candidates, but they voted a few months ago. And so some of the races that I personally am watching, because I'm from New Mexico, is Gallup-McKinley County Schools, Albuquerque Public Schools, and Central Consolidated Schools, which all feature Native candidates who are running for the school board. And I think that these local elections are so important, and they're actually oftentimes they have greater impact than sort of congressional or at the presidential level, because they are so hyper localized to a community. And so I cannot underscore enough how important local elections are and how important it is to go to the polls, especially when it comes to the school board, when it comes to mayoral races, when it comes to county commission races.
I'm so
Those
sorry,
are all
Pauly.
extremely important.
We'll have to cut it off there. We thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.